Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Celtic have solidified their place in the final of the Scottish Cup after a very convincing win over St Johnstone this afternoon. So we're here to talk about all of that. I'm sure we've all had a few libations. We're all enjoying ourselves on a fine Easter Sunday. Celtic are on track for the treble. That's all that really matters, and I'm sure that's what you're here to talk about. So let's do that, shall we? If you haven't already, you know what to do. Please go down below, hit like and subscribe. It's nice to see you all for today's match reaction. Celtic 5-0 winners over St Johnstone in the Scottish Cup semi-final. We have booked our place in the final of the Scottish Cup. We'll take on Aberdeen on May 24th this year. And Celtic are basically one more game away from a treble. That's essentially the big headline. That's essentially the big story coming out of today's game. Celtic had one task, and it was to right the wrongs of what happened at McDiarmid Park a couple of weeks ago. And we spoke about it on the podcast. We said on the podcast, you know, the bigger pitch at Hampden, the bigger occasion, the fact that there was so much on the line for Celtic this afternoon would change the complexion of the game compared to what it was at McDiarmid Park. And there was no reason for us to down tools up there. There was no reason why we shouldn't have been playing the way we played today when we went away up to Perth a few weeks ago. But essentially, we were never going to let that happen again. This game, to me, was, and I mean this with all due respect to St Johnstone, it was always going to be a Celtic win. There was no way that Celtic didn't win today's game. And the gunpowder that fueled everything for that today was what happened up at McDiarmid Park a couple of weeks ago. You know, that was the whole reason why today was a game that Celtic just wouldn't and couldn't lose. Because we saw the reaction, we saw what happened coming out of Perth, and we couldn't let that happen again, especially when there was a treble on the line, Hampden on the line, a semi-final on the line. Celtic just weren't going to let that happen. And we went up and we battered them. Sorry, St Johnstone. I don't want to take all day in today's match reaction. I don't think I need to take all day for today's match reaction. I assume the majority of us will be enjoying our Easter Sundays or bank holidays. I presume that the majority of people watching this video will be doing it on the Monday morning following their enjoyment on Easter Sunday. And I want to be out there with you. I want to be out having a couple of drinks. But Celtic were just great today, and even after a dodgy 35 minutes, dodgy's not even the right word to use. I think that's offensive on Celtic's part to call it dodgy 35 minutes. But after a tough 35 minutes, we still came out to score 5 goals in the remaining 60 minutes left in the game. St Johnstone just couldn't handle us when we found that first goal, and that's all that Celtic needed. It was a very similar story to what happened up at McDiarmid Park, and the reason that we went on to lose that game was because when they went up 1-0 very early on, Celtic just couldn't crack the code. They couldn't find that goal, and it couldn't get them into a rhythm. It couldn't open St Johnstone up. And there's a reason why we ended up scoring 5 today, because when we went 1-0 up 35 minutes into the game, St Johnstone only had one option. They only had one way to move forward with the game, and that was to open up and get something. Because semi-final is a case of, you're out, you're out. You know, you've got one chance, you've got one game. St Johnstone had to open up a little bit. They had to make things in the middle a little less dense. They had to widen their play a little bit and just open up those channels that Celtic couldn't find in the opening 35 minutes. Whereas in the league game a few weeks ago, they didn't have to worry about that because, you know, if we lose here today, it's fine. We've got next week. They didn't have next week in this game. It's a semi-final. But when we found that first goal, the game changed. After a brutal 35 minutes of trying to find the final pass in the final third, we finally got what we needed. And Celtic didn't look back from there. They just didn't look back, and it was as simple as that. And I think that ultimately, everything that happened after the 35th minute today doesn't need to be examined in much depth, because Celtic were brilliant. Every player was brilliant. St Johnstone ultimately looked like a team that couldn't keep up with Celtic, much as the case with many teams in Scotland nowadays. But today, Celtic exaggerated once more that the case is Hampden Park is like a training ground for us. All the goals were just brilliant, weren't they? They were just brilliant goals. From McGregor's first to Jota's last, all 5 goals for Celtic today, well worked. I will add in a caveat that I did miss Jota's goal. I missed the final goal of the game, the 5-0, the fifth goal. I was trying to get my way through the pished-soaked toilets of Hampden, which is always great, up to your fucking ankles, basically, the way it is in the cubicles. But aside from that, I mean, God almighty, Celtic were just tearing a hole through St Johnstone. We just needed that first one. McGregor, brilliant finish. Story of McGregor's season, I suppose. Dyson Maeda with 2 goals. Dare we talk about his record at this point? The guy that I want to talk about the most, Adam Ida. Easter Sunday, an Adam Ida goal. It was always on the cards. He's been overdue a goal. I think the last 2 or 3 games that Adam Ida's played and he's looked really, really good, and he's actually been hard done by not finding a goal. That stretches back to McDiarmid Park. It stretches into last week's game and today. The front three looked really good today. I enjoyed watching Forrest. I enjoyed watching Maeda, as I do every week, and I enjoyed watching Ida, who I think again had a good game. He deserves that goal. He needed that goal more than anything, didn't he? It was long overdue for Adam Ida to find a goal, and I'm glad that he got it. I think between now and the end of the season, he adds a few more of them, and the whole conversation around him changes for many people. But his influence in the final third shouldn't go unrecognised. It shouldn't at all. And I'm just so glad to see him getting the score sheet. I'm glad to see Maeda padding those stats as much as he is. And it was nice to see Jota come on and get a goal as well. I think there was just such a chemistry about Celtic today that made everything flow so nicely. And that was applicable to the first half, extended into the second half. There was just something around Celtic today that almost wanted to rub it in the faces of those who doubted us after McDiarmid Park, and I enjoy that. I enjoy those sorts of performances from Celtic. I just want that to be the attitude that carries us forward from now till the end of the season. I don't want us to look at these league games as if it's a run-in of games where it doesn't matter because we've already won the league or whatever. I don't want us to go to Ibrox and not turn up to this sort of ability because it doesn't matter because we've won the league. I want us to treat it all as if it means something. I mean, every player today was fine. Fine, that is very offensive for me. Every player today was great. And that's what we need from every game moving forward. I mean, God, I've not even brought up the name Rio Hatate. How good was he in the middle of the park today? How good was the middle of the park today? McGregor, Hatate, Engels, all 3 of them. And especially Hatate, man. He was just... 3 assists he ended the game with, by the way. 3 assists. Just a brilliant player. Somebody who too many Celtic fans have future endeavoured in their own eyes and said they don't mind if we move him on, don't mind if he leaves. Good God almighty, give your head a wobble. I wouldn't be surprised if it's time up for Hatate this year. I wouldn't be surprised if he moves on. But if you're actively wishing for him to go, if you want to see the back of him, why? He is such a phenomenal player. A phenomenal player. And today's performance solidified that for me. Substitutions were good. Performances off the bench were good. Ultimately, Celtic just looked fantastic. And for the tactical and analytical breakdown that you might be looking for, God almighty, after a few drinks, you're not looking for it right now. I tell you, you might want it tomorrow. Hampden on Easter Sunday doesn't happen all that often. This is tea, by the way. It's not an Irish coffee or anything like that. It's just tea. I promise it's just tea. I would try and tip it over, but I don't want to pour it all over, boys. Yeah. I enjoy these sorts of match reactions, just talking absolute nonsense. Why are you here? I ask. I loved watching Celtic today, and that's the sort of performance that I know Brendan Rodgers can deliver, that I know this Celtic team can deliver, and I know that we can build upon with signings next year. What I saw today ultimately was a Celtic side who are hungry for more domination, and hungry to take the next step forward, and I hope that is backed upon in the summer. We are one step away from another treble. When I started this YouTube channel, Celtic had 3 trebles to their name. 3. And we're going for... Is it treble number 8 we're going for? In the space of 10 years, that's how many we've won. That does all of it. That's all I need to say. Hampden Park is basically Celtic Park. And we'll talk about things in a more sober light tomorrow. Take care of yourselves. Celtic 5, St Johnstone 0. Scottish Cup final. Treble is on.